Greetings and welcome to the Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismember pop culture in all its forms. Today, we'll be talking about Marvel once again in the aftermath of another big-budget Marvel release in theaters, The Thunderbolts, which has been rechristened the New Avengers, I guess? While critics and audiences seem to like the movie, it still may struggle to recoup its budget. Why is that? Is Marvel fatigue keeping people away from the cinema? What can Marvel do to reverse course on its recent financial troubles? Not long ago, Marvel seemed unstoppable. Beginning in 2008, with the first Iron Man movie, up through Avengers Endgame in 2019, almost every one of the 20-plus movies that released in the so-called MCU met or exceeded expectations, both critically and financially. Not all the movies were great, to be sure, such as Iron Man 3 or Thor: The Dark World, for instance, but even those low points still told a coherent story and contributed meaningfully to the shared narrative across the greater Marvel universe. The 2010s truly were the superhero decade. Blockbuster hit after blockbuster hit, and a pop culture Goliath was born and raised. With the 1-2 punch of 2018's Avengers Infinity War and 2019's Endgame, both breaking the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time list, it seemed that superheroes in general, and Marvel in particular, were the currency of modern movie making. What Marvel did in building their cinematic universe was revolutionary. Sure, other brands had built large movie franchises before. Star Wars, for instance, released its 11th major movie by 2019, but that was a franchise that took over 40 years to mature. Marvel had done it in a single decade, and in doing so, they had become something of a money-printing industry. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and all too often, the end is accelerated by greed, ambition, and hubris. From the Roman Empire to Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns, when an enterprise begins thinking it's too big to fail and over-leverages itself in order to maximize growth and profit, the inevitable fall is utterly predictable. In the case of Marvel, there were several things that contributed to declining sales and popularity. I won't go too deeply into the ideological missteps they took, engaging in identity politics and pushing the so-called MCU, although those things definitely played a major part. And not because they were woke or liberal or progressive and alienated viewers politically, but because those things were prioritized over good storytelling. As I've said before, you can focus entire movies on woke ideas and progressive politics as long as you still tell a good story. But sacrifice your story to force-feed those ideas, and you lose your audience, practically every time. No one, outside of masochists and rabid ideologues, enjoys being lectured. Anyway, while social and political messaging affected the quality of the content, the quantity of content also affected its quality. While a steady stream of movies ranging from bad to terrible contributed to Marvel fatigue, nothing came close to the seemingly endless supply of garbage that was created for Disney+. Shows such as Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Ms. Marvel, Echo, Moon Knight, Secret Invasion, Agatha All Along, She-Hulk were all failures. Partly because they focused on identity politics and representation instead of storytelling, but also because they were never meant to be anything more than content. Not good shows or good stories or vehicles to expand the lore of the Marvel Universe, but just because they were content, product to be consumed, the entertainment equivalent of empty calories. A recent article in the Wall Street Journal delved into this topic. Originally entitled, quote, "Disney wanted more from Marvel, now it wants less," but for some reason changed to, "Even Marvel knows its movies and shows need to be better." The staff writer Ben Fritz takes an unexpectedly critical look at the MCU post-Endgame. Apparently Kevin Feige, the head of Marvel Studios, recently acknowledged a large part of the problem with the quality of MCU content lately is that there's just too much of it. He suggested that in an effort to satisfy Disney's hunger for content on its new streaming service, Marvel churned out too many movies and shows with interconnected stories. In doing so, Feige stated that watching Marvel movies and shows now feels more like homework than entertainment. The article goes on to state that the deluge of material from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or MCU, on Disney Plus overwhelmed and eventually alienated viewers. It also stretched Feige and his team's resources thin, diluting the quality of their output. Marvel's box office sales, streaming popularity, and formerly untouchable position in pop culture suffered. Now, Feige is leading an internal overhaul aimed at getting the studio back on track. Marvel is making fewer TV shows with standalone stories that don't require prior knowledge of the MCU. Feige is focused on fixing the studio's movie slate following recent flops like February's Captain America: Brave New World. Now, the article goes on to outline the rise of the MCU and Feige's role in its success, going from 2008's Iron Man through Avengers Endgame in 2019, a string of blockbuster hits that earned collectively more than $20 billion. But where do you go after that kind of success? Endgame tied up and resolved most of the stories that were told over the past decade, and many of the marquee characters and actors were sunsetting their roles. Well, one answer came from Bob Iger, who was determined to build Disney's new streaming platform into a successful rival for Netflix. Iger thus began ordering content from Marvel. Soon after Endgame, creative staffers began meeting in their office on the Disney studio lot to figure out where the MCU could possibly go next. In the nearby executive building, Disney's senior leadership had another priority. Chief executive Bob Iger was launching Disney Plus as his answer to Netflix. He needed loads of new series for it and was counting on Marvel to provide many of them. The strategy became just expansion, 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 said a person who worked at Marvel at the time. Feige told colleagues that he agreed to the plan because of a zealousness to tell more stories and a desire to be an excellent corporate citizen, whatever the hell that means. It turned out to be a mistake. Marvel's transition from producing a few hours of movie content annually to several dozen hours of streaming shows and films eventually broke down the studio's processes. A pair of executives oversaw each show, while Feige remained the final decision maker on every significant creative issue, even though there were exponentially more decisions to make each day. People who worked at Marvel in the early 2020s said it was challenging to secure enough time with Feige to get his feedback. As a result, they sometimes spent weeks on work that proved irrelevant once he weighed in, then found themselves with little time to implement his changes before a deadline. Desperate staffers resorted to chasing Feige in the halls to get answers. And that does make sense. Instead of focusing on a few quality projects each year that moved the narrative along while still remaining entertaining and tightly scripted, they had too many irons in the proverbial fire, and Feige could no longer manage any of them efficiently. Then the article goes into so-called Marvel fatigue. The internal dysfunction began to show in Marvel's output. Viewers complained that there was too much Marvel content to keep up with, and a growing proportion of it felt subpar. Well, I think the second point is more relevant than the first. Would people really be turned off by too much good content? I don't know. I think it was the subpar content that caused people to complain and tune out. Goes on to say that fans rejected big-budget event series like the alien attack drama Secret Invasion starring Samuel L. Jackson, shows the company was proud of, including Ms. Marvel, about a Pakistani-American teenager who gained superpowers, failed to attract many viewers. In theaters, Marvel's biggest hits this period were nostalgia plays that tied up old storylines, such as Spider-Man: No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine. I would add Guardians of the Galaxy 3 to that list as well. At any rate, employees talked regularly about Marvel fatigue. They worried they had created a, quote, no new fans club, in which people unfamiliar with the state of the MCU couldn't watch a new release because they'd have no idea what was going on. Now, I don't entirely buy this Marvel fatigue argument. I'm sure to some extent new viewers are at a disadvantage coming into a franchise, but that's the same in any established franchise. Are new people expected to start watching a TV show in its 10th season? I mean, there's always going to be some price for admission in any ongoing series or shared universe. But if the movies and shows are good, people will want to catch up. So again, it goes more to the quality than anything else. Now, admittedly, when resources are limited and output stretches those resources, quality is bound to suffer. So that point is well taken. make fewer shows and movies, not because people don't want to watch so many shows and movies, but solely to maintain some degree of quality control. And to that point, Bob Iger has had to admit that quantity, in our case, diluted quality, and Marvel has suffered greatly from that. Accordingly, Marvel has since decided to cut back significantly on TV production. Marvel is releasing only 1 or 2 live-action streaming series annually starting next year, and has already ordered multiple seasons of some so their stories can continue without crossing over to the big screen. Additionally, a senior executive is overseeing television so that Feige can focus on film. I think that's a pretty smart move. As long as the senior executives have some creative control, I think keeping Feige focused on films is the best way forward. In many ways, Marvel has reverted to its strategy from before the streaming boom, as if the past 5 years had been a bad dream. I don't think this article is revealing any secrets hitherto undreamt of by past or present audience members.
Did you seriously just say hitherto undreamt of? I'm going to allow that.
Anyone who has eyes and the capacity for rational thought knew years ago that Marvel's oversaturation, especially, although not exclusively on Disney+, remember we live in a universe where the Marvels and Ant-Man Quantumania exist, was affecting the quality of content. What is breaking news is the implicit acknowledgement by Marvel and Disney insiders, and the rather more explicit concession by the mainstream, or at least mainstream adjacent media, that Marvel has sucked over the past few years. This is the same media that has, for the past 5 years, gaslit the public and lambasted critics of anything Marvel, insisting that shows like She-Hulk and Agatha were good actually, but that trolls review bombed it and made it look bad. So at least some legacy media outlets are admitting that not everything Marvel was great and well loved, which is to say, they are engaging in somewhat less blatant lying. Progress of a sort, as the late Christopher Hitchens frequently quipped.
Because I think it's rather sweet that people of faith also think they ought to have some evidence. And I think it's progress of a kind.
So to sum up, it appears that Disney and Marvel seem to be committed to more quality control going forward, or at the very least, to creating less poor quality content. Either way, it should be a net positive. Now, if only they would aim their self-reflection at the content of their writing and focus on dialing back identity politics and constant messaging. Oh well, baby steps, I guess. Anyway, what do you think? Do you suffer from Marvel fatigue? Are you looking forward to Marvel and Disney scaling back production to focus more on quality? Or do you think it'll even matter? Let me know in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching the video. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Bye for now. I hope to see you next time in the Culture Wars.